يتدبرون القرآن
ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا
فلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High, they revealed the Qur'an to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam for guidance to all mankind till the day of judgment. For all matters of goodness, whether it's matters of belief, rulings, lessons learned from stories mentioned in the Qur'an. And this is basically the subject of this episode and the coming one, inshallah ta'ala, in verses of Surah Al-Baqarah from verse number 246 all the way to verse number 252. A famous story that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in the Qur'an and in the previous books. The story of Talut, Saul, and Goliath, and Jalut, and David, Dawood alayhi salam. This is a story that happened before the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed verses in the Qur'an with regarding to the story. The Qur'an is not a book of stories. The Qur'an is a book of guidance. So there is wisdom behind the story, great benefits. When we read the story and we need to ponder over the story and get to extract the benefits and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. From the previous episode we get to know about the town in which the people, they fled it out of the fear of death, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained for them to die and then restored their life and so on. He was preparing the companions radiallahu anhum when it comes to fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, answering one of the doubts that would come to a person when he is ordered to fight for the sake of Allah, and that is, you will be afraid of dying if you fight for the sake of Allah. So the previous verse talked about this. Then, in the story of Talut and Jalut, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching the companions radiallahu anhum and the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam the means of victory, the means of being superior. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained unto you to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there are certain means that you need to learn how to obey the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for you to be superior, and how a few or less amount of people of the believers would defeat those who are in large number and more powerful and well equipped and so on among the disbelievers. This is one of the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the face of earth. But the believers, even if they are less in number, even if they are not well equipped as the disbelievers, but they need to have certain characteristics in them, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would aid them, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make them victorious if they would fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And this is something that is mentioned throughout the whole entire Qur'an. And we saw that in practice in the life of the companions radiallahu anhum, how they were always outnumbered by their enemies, and how they had less when it comes to matters of wealth and equipment and things like this, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give them victory. Why? Because they had certain qualities, certain characteristics that never fails whatsoever. If the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ would hold fast to these examples, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them victory on the face of earth and in the hereafter. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّا لَنَنْصُرُ رُسُلَنَا فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَيَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْأَشْهَادُ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that indeed we give victory to our messengers and the believers in this life and in the hereafter. So let's get to know the story. And as mentioned before, and this is the way of the Qur'an, you won't find too many details in the story, the details that sometimes some people they would want to know. Many names, many dates, certain specific situations here or there that you might find it in other books. We would find in the Qur'an only what is benefiting for us, and this is the goal. We need to get the benefits from the story, not just to be immersed in the story as a story and without reflecting on how to ponder and how to act on our life, in our life according to the story, because the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the same. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and we will take the first verse in the story, verse number 246, and then after we finish inshallah ta'ala with the story, and if it's in this, not in this episode, next one inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about the benefits in details, one after the other by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first one, verse number 246 from Surah Al-Baqarah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ألم تر إلى الملأ من بني إسرائيل من بعد موسى إذ قالوا لنبي له مبعث لنا ملكا نقاتل في سبيل الله قال هل عسيتم إن كتب عليكم القتال ألا تقاتلوا قالوا وما لنا ألا نقاتل في سبيل الله وقد أخرجنا من ديارنا وأبنائنا فلما كتب عليهم القتال تولوا إلا قليلا منهم والله عليم بالظالمين. The first verse in the story, in this set of verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the meaning of which, have you not considered the assembly of the children of Israel after the time of Moses, when they said to a prophet of theirs, send to us a king, and we will fight in the way of Allah. He said, would you perhaps refrain from fighting if fighting was prescribed for you? They said, and why should we not fight in the cause of Allah when we have been driven out from our homes and from our children? But when fighting was prescribed for them, they turned away except for a few of them, and Allah is knowing of the wrongdoers. So the first verse is stating the fact and the situation of the people of the children of Israel, and how they were in the 40 years of loss in the peninsula of Sinai, in the Tih, when they were lost there, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained for them that that would happen to them as a result of them disobeying the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished them. And they are in such a small area, the peninsula of Sinai, but they cannot even find their way out. And they were in that place for 40 years. So it had to take another generation to be raised in such a state, for them to be raised in a different attitude than the attitude of the nation or the generation that were witnessing the people of Fir'aun. Fir'aun, when he was superior in the land, and the people of the children of Israel, they were raised as humiliated, and they would take humiliation, and they were raised in such a way that this is not the generation to fight for the sake of Allah. This is not the generation that has the honor and dignity to defend the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was in such a way that they will be lost in these tens of years, so that a generation will be raised that have some honor and dignity and sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can see the resemblance between this ummah and the nations before. So we have to witness, and this is something that we need to do when we're reciting the story. We're not talking about the lessons yet, but just when we mention the story, we need to reflect on our situations as Muslims, because this is not mentioned in the Qur'an for play, or for people to just to listen to another story. No, this is meant for this ummah also, because the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the same. The way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never changes. So the Mala', which is basically the powerful ones, those who have wealth and honor and so on, from Bani Israel, from the children of Israel, from min ba'di Musa, after Musa alayhi salam. إِذْ قَالُوا لِنَبِيٍّ لَهُمْ, they said to a messenger among them. Who is this prophet of Allah, whether it's Yusha ibn Nun or others? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And it's not mentioned in the Qur'an the name of this prophet, so this is good enough for us. They said to a prophet among them, إِبْعَثْ لَنَا مَلِكًا نُقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. They said to him that send to us a king, so that we would fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They understood that they need to have someone that has certain qualities for them to be led, someone to lead them to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِبْعَثْ لَنَا مَلِكًا, that send to us a king and we will fight in the way of Allah. So they wanted to fight for the sake of Allah, to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior, to take them, their state, out of this humiliation that they have been in, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Qur'an. Then their prophet said to them, قَالَ هَلْ عَسَيْتُمْ إن كتب عليكم القتال ألا تقاتلوا. He said to them, would you perhaps refrain from fighting if fighting was prescribed for you? You are now in that state where you don't have the capability to fight for the sake of Allah. If the fight has been prescribed unto you, would you refrain from it? Would you be afraid for your own life, as we heard about the story of the town before? Because this is in the instinct of the human being. Only the believers will be steadfast, because this is a test for you. Would you be refraining from it? Many people, when they are in times of distress, or their people and so on, they would want to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when it comes to the reality and facing their enemies, they might be different. They might refrain, they might flee away. Fleeing away when the person in the battlefield, this is a major sin. So the person and the ummah, it has to be raised in such a way that it would sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Would a person imagine that the ummah as a whole, and again it doesn't have to be the whole ummah, it doesn't have to be the whole nation, as we would see only few, because this is sometimes would make some people give up on basically working for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If there is those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed His bounty on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. But for the ummah in large, when a person is not willing to sacrifice anything in this life for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior, then where's the goodness? If even sacrificing some minutes of sleep for a person to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to pray Salatul Fajr, a person is not able to sacrifice that for the sake of Allah to make the Salatul Fajr in the house of Allah. How would that specific person would go and put his own life in danger when he is asked to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Things has to be according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. But again, this will come into the lessons. So they asked their Prophet that he would send for them a king so that they would fight for the sake of Allah. قال هل عسيتم إن كتب عليكم القتال ألا تقاتلوا. That would you, perhaps maybe that you would refrain from fighting if it becomes obligatory for you? Would you be courageous and be steadfast when it comes the time for you to fight for the sake of Allah? قالوا وما لنا ألا نقاتل في سبيل الله وقد أخرجنا من ديننا. They said, and why should we not fight in the cause of Allah when we have been driven out from our homes and from our children? That means, what is other choice for them? How can it get worse than this? Right? So they mentioned the reason behind why they want to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And why would a human being would not want to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when this is their state, when they have been driven out of their homes and their children. So that what else for them on the face of earth for them to hold fast to? What would they lose basically? What more things they would lose if they would fight for the sake of Allah? Fighting for the sake of Allah, it might make them lose their life. But basically, as if they are saying, what is in our life that we want to keep, basically? We lost everything. They are humiliated, they lost their homes, they lost their children, right? So what else for them to keep? So this was the reason for them that they want to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as some of the ulama, they say, as if you would feel in that statement that maybe it wasn't sincerely, truly, that it's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to the majority of those who fled afterwards. Because their concern was just something materialistic on the face of earth. They fight because they are humiliated. They fight because they lost their homes. They lost their children. This is, of course, definitely a valid reason. But for the believers, their goal is to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior. And this is, if it comes into these means, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy, He might have the believers be in such a situation so that that would lead them to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that they would receive the great honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they said that to the Prophet, and then you see the verse, فَلَمَّا كُتِبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقِتَالُ تَوَلَّوْا إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِّنْهُمْ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِالظَّالِمِينَ. When fighting was prescribed for them, then they asked for it. So when it was prescribed for them, they turned away, except for a few of them, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is knowing of the wrongdoers. The wrongdoers, those who fled away, those who turned away after they asked for it. It became now obligatory on them. and they would flee away. If they would flee away and turn away from what is an obligation, then they are wrongdoers. They are committing injustice, basically. Allahu alimun bil-zalimin. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knower of the zalimin. The zalimin, the wrongdoers. So when people would leave away fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are bringing harm to their people, to the whole ummah in large. As the Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith, that one of the reason for people to be humiliated on the face of earth is they left the fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِذَا تَبَايَعْتُمْ بِالْعِينَ وَتَبَعْتُمْ أَذْنَابَ الْبَقَرِ وَرَضِيتُمْ بِالزَّرْعِ وَتَرَكْتُمُ الْجِهَادَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ سَلَّطَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ ذُلًّا لا ينزع عنكم حتى تراجعوا أو حتى ترجعوا إلى دينكم أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Which means that if you buy and sell with al-'ina, which is one of the form of usury transactions, if this is what you do, O Muslims, you would deal with usury, and you would be satisfied with the tiling and the agriculture and this world basically, and you would follow the tails of the cows, being satisfied with this world, and you would leave fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have humility being unto you, that you will be humiliated till you go back to your religion. So this is something that is one of the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the believers or the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ also is the same thing would happen to it as the nations before. So most of them, they turned away except a few, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows those who are transgressors, those who are the wrongdoers. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the story right after the break, so stay with us inshallah.
يتدبرون القرآن.
Tech Talk. We're going to look how to create a website and which Islamic websites to actually visit. What inspired you to create your own website?
One of the challenges that we face every day, the site or the application should be accessible worldwide. I remember when I was younger, one of my friends asked me to convince his father to get him a desktop. Even the laptop, if you compared both of them in terms of cost, laptop roughly cost twice the money if you compare it with the desktop.
Hackers, the word hackers, most of the youth people are very interested about that word. They say, hey, I'd like to be a hacker. Because there is a type of hacker, doing great job. We call them white hat hacker.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. After we heard of the story, of the beginning of the story of Talut and Jalut, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained fighting unto them after they asked for it, most of them, they turned away. Only few were steadfast, and they kept with their promise that they would fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best the zalimin. Those who turned away, of course, the majority turned away. They turned away out of the fear of death or weakness of iman and so on. It would not prevent them. It would not bring any goodness for them, because they are basically wrongdoers. Then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the next verse, verse number 247, وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ بَعَثَ لَكُمْ طَالُوتَ مَلِكًا قَالُوا أَنَّا يَكُونُ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ عَلَيْنَا وَنَحْنُ أَحَقُّ بِالْمُلْكِ مِنْهُ ولم يؤت سعة من المال قال إن الله اصطفاه عليكم وزاده بسطة في العلم والجسم والله يؤتي ملكه من يشاء والله واسع عليم. Which means, and their prophet said to them, indeed Allah has sent to you Talut, Saul, as a king. They said, how can he have kingship over us while we are more worthy of kingship than him? And he has not been given any measure of wealth. He said, indeed, Allah has chosen him over you and has increased him abundantly in knowledge and stature. And Allah gives his sovereignty to whom he wills, and Allah is all-encompassing in favor and knowing. So their prophet, and again this is something that they asked for a king to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it needs a king, it needs a leader for them to fight under his flag and so on. So their prophet meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to him. So he said to them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not the prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inna Allah, that indeed Allah, قَدْ بَعَثَ لَكُمْ طَالُوتَ مَلِكًا, sent to you Talut, Saul, as a king. Talut, he sent, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him as a king. قالوا أن يكون له الملك علينا ونحن أحق بالملك منه. They said, how? Anna is a word to be used when it's something that is far away from being correct. Anna يكون له الملك. How far that is for him to be a king on us, to rule over us. وَنَحْنُ أَحَقُّ بِالْمُلْكِ مِنْهِ. And again, this is for those who are the few, right? The majority, they're turned away. And from among the few, this is what is being said from them. And we have more rights to be kings than him. And he has no abundance in wealth. This is the criteria that they know, or that they have in their society, when it comes to who is the king. He has to be the one that has more wealth, right? And he has to be from a certain level of a society, or whatever there is. This is basically what people all over the earth also they think. Many of them, they would think this way. So when they said that, they didn't take it from their prophet as we listen and we obey. We listen and we obey, and that's it. And compare this to the ways of the companions radiallahu anhum. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from this ummah. They would dispute what the messenger would come with. And again, if human beings are able to know what is right and what is wrong, what's the purpose of having messengers? What's the purpose of having prophets of Allah? If they already know what it is, why did they ask their prophet to start with to bring a king for them? So when he brought a king for them, and he said to them that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that sent him as a king over you, that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless him for you, He will protect you and will make you victorious because he is sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But still they would say such an ignorant statements in which how can he be king over us when we have the rights to be the kings and he has not enough wealth and so on. Then their prophet said to them, قَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَاهُ عَلَيْكُمْ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him over you. And that's enough. He chose him over you because of many qualities, and one of which وَزَادَهُ بَسْطَةً فِي الْعِلْمِ وَالْجِسْمِ, and he gave him basta, meaning abundance, in ilm, in knowledge, and al-jism, in his stature, in his body. And these are the criteria for a person to be a ruler, for a person to be a king. He has more knowledge, and he also strong, physically strong. That he has the ability, the intellectual abilities when it comes with knowledge, and he also he is fit physically for such a position. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. He still, the Prophet told them and responded to them with the wisdom behind it. Although it was enough for them that they would submit to the orders from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. وَاللَّهُ يُؤْتِي مُلْكَهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. And the Prophet said to them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the kingdom to whomever He wills subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mulkahu, the kingdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because everything is owned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no king on the face of earth in the absolute sense, because he is in the kingdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody has an ownership in the absolute sense, because everything is owned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when there is a king, and he's a very powerful king, and he owns many things, lands and people and so on, soon he would depart from this life and he would leave that to someone that would come after him. So he doesn't have an everlasting ownership. So it's not a real ownership. It's just being entrusted with whatever he owns, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of all things. So the Prophet giving them this statement for them to have it as a belief in their hearts, so that their actions will be accordingly. That it's not the kingdom that is given to the person that he owns it in this absolute sense. It's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَن يَشَاءُ, whoever he wills subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he takes it away also from whoever he wills, as it's mentioned in Surah Al-Imran. وَاللَّهُ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-encompassing in favor and knowing. وَاسِعٌ, He's all-encompassing when it comes to the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encompasses everything. And also, physically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of all things, and He's over His creation subhanahu wa ta'ala. So any goodness should be asked from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alim, He's the all-knower. He knows who is the one to be in charge, and who's the one to be the king, and who's the one to lead, and so on. And you see the bounties of Allah, that they had a prophet for them to ask, and the prophet would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reveal to him. So the matter should be, we listen and we obey. And we would get to learn from the lessons from that, of course, because this is definitely a lesson for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. So this was the response of the few, those who stayed with the Prophet after fighting has been prescribed unto them. Then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse number 248, وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ إِنَّ آيَةَ مُلْكِهِ أَنْ يَأْتِيَكُمُ التَّابُوتُ فِيهِ سَكِينَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَبَقِيَّةٌ مِّمَّا تَرَكَ آلُ مُوسَى وَآلُ هَارُونَ تَحْمِلُهُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Which means, and their prophet said to them, indeed, a sign of his kingship is that the chest will come to you, in which is assurance from your Lord, and a remnant of what the family of Moses and the family of Harun, Aaron, had left, carried by the angels. Indeed, in that is a sign for you if you are believers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy, He would aid the king with a sign, although it was enough for them that the Prophet is telling them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to them a king. But see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving them all the means so that they don't have any excuse. That وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ, and see that their Prophet said to them, إِنَّ آيَةَ مُلْكِ, that the sign of his kingship, the sign of his kingship, that He is the king, and for you to follow Him and to be under His banner and so on, أَن يَأْتِيَكُمُ التَّابُوتُ, that He will bring to you the chest, this big box or whatever. فِيهِ سَكِينَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ, in it is a comfort from your Lord, an assurance from your Lord. What is this specifically? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Many people said many things, but we leave it as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it, something that would be of a tranquility for them, something that would bring comfort and assurance for them, because they are about to fight in such a way that is not a balanced one, and they are outnumbered by the enemies and so on, but they need the assurance and they need the steadfastness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَبَقِيَّةٌ مِّمَّا تَرَكَ آلُ مُوسَى وَآلُ هَارُونَ تَحْمِلُهُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ, that His sign that the angels will come down with this chest, which is a big box and so on, that has this comfort or this assurance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and remnants from what Musa alayhi salam, Moses and Harun, his brother Aaron, had left, for them to be aided with the blessings of what's in it, and they will be given victory as a result of this mean from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He would make the angels descend with it. So this is clear signs for them. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ, indeed this is a sign for you if you are believers. That means what is unto you now is to submit yourself and to follow the Prophet and so on and so forth. So what happened? Then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and this is in verse number 249, فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ قَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مُبْتَلِيكُمْ بِنَهَرٍ فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي إِلَّا مَنِ اغْتَرَفَ غُرْفَةً بِيَدِهِ فَشَرِبُوا مِنْهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْهُمْ فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَهُ هُوَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ قالوا لا طاقة لنا اليوم بجالوت وجنوده قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقوا الله كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين. And when Talut, Saul, went forth with the soldiers, he said, indeed Allah will be testing you with a river, so whoever drinks from it is not of me, and whoever does not taste, it is indeed of me, excepting one who takes from it in the hollow of his hand. But they drank from it, except a very few of them. Then when he had crossed it, along with those who believed with him, they said, there is no power for us today against Goliath and his soldiers. But those who were certain that they would meet Allah, they said, how many a small company has overcome a large company by permission of Allah, and Allah is with the patient. So this is now another set of the story in which, after the matter has been made clear to them that Talut is their king, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a sign for them to make it clear for them that he is the king that would bring the victory from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to them. They asked for it. They are in state of humiliation and so on. And when the fighting has been prescribed unto them, most of them they turned away, and only few were steadfast, and they were left and they were holding fast to this, to the truth. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the king was sent, فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ, when he went forth with the soldiers going to the battlefield, going to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ, Fasal meaning that he went forth, he took them away from their dwellings, and they are already on their way to fight for the sake of Allah. Some said that there is a relationship between this story and the previous one, that the people, those who were afflicted by plague, and then they were they fled away from their towns as a result of plague or enemies attacking them, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered them to die, and then He gave them life. Some said it is from the same town, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So when Talut, Saul, left with the soldiers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested the people, another test. And this is a great lesson that we need to learn from the story, something that the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ should basically get to know this lesson, because this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful. That He said to them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mubtalikum binahar, that Allah is testing you with regards to a river. فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي, whoever drinks from it, he's not one of us. That means he is to be away from this army. He is not part of this army, whoever drinks from this river. And it was said that they were in such a state of thirst, right, that when they went forth to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they were so much thirsty, and all of the water that they have, that they lost and so on, so they are in need of to drink. And of course this is something that to sustain their life and to be able to fight the enemies. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests them by a river, and they have the messenger from Allah to tell them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is revealing to him that you are not to drink from this river. Imagine the test. It's not an easy thing. It would really shows who are truthfully following the messenger, even if it's something that is against to what they physically would see or comprehend. فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي, he is not one of us, he is not of me, he is not to be in my army. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي, which means that whoever does not taste it is indeed of me. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي إِلَّا مَنْ اغْتَرَفَ غُرْفَةً بِيَدِهِ, except the one that would take a sip of it with the hollow of his hand. So this was the only amount of water for them to drink. If a person would take from the river just a sip of water from the hollow of his hand, and he would drink that. More than that, to drink from it and so on, that would make the person out of the army. He's not one of Talut, meaning he's not part of his army. So what happened to the few that were steadfast from among the majority, those who turned away when fighting has been prescribed unto them, and they already set forth and they are in the army, and they're going to relieve their ummah, their nation, from humility and to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what happened? فَشَرِبُوا مِنْهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْهُمْ, they drank from it. Meaning, all the army, إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْهُمْ, except the few among them. So most of the army that was with him, they failed in the test. They chose the adornment of this life. They chose their immediate desire over the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, over the fact to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior. And they disobeyed their Prophet, and he told them that this is a test for you, and do not drink from it except a sip of water and so on. But they refused. And most of them, they drank from it, except إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِّنْهُمْ, except very few of them. Very few from among the few. And I hope that you are following with this. فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَهُ هُوَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ, and when Talut pass this test, which is the river, him and the believers with him, and see the believers is mentioned here. Finally, the word the believers is mentioned. This is for the first time in the story. The word amanu is mentioned after how many tests, right? So when he left the river, him and the few among the few, قالوا لا طاقة لنا اليوم بجالوت وجنوده. The believers, they said, we have no power whatsoever today when it comes to Jalut and his army, Goliath and his army, the enemies. قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو الله. This is such an amazing thing. Those who have the certainty that they would meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from among the believers, meaning this is the special group among the special group among the ummah, right? They said, كم من فئة قليلة. These are the ones that have the proper understanding. Those who did not drink from the river, they were among the believers, but among them, those who have understanding, those who have the proper understanding of the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is definitely the few of the few of the few, they said that كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله. How many times, this is a repeated thing, this is the sunnah of Allah, the way of Allah, that a few amount of people would defeat the other party, which is so many. How many? A small company has overcome a large company. Small army would overcome a large one. But what? بإذن الله, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu ma'as sabirin, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those who are patient. So then what happened after that? We will get to know that inshallah ta'ala. Stay with us.
يتدبرون القرآن
Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Continuing the story of Talut and Jalut and Dawood as it would come inshallah ta'ala. We're just mentioning the story, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us life next time, we need to give more time to the lessons behind the story. Such an interesting and an amazing story. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful to this ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for us to know where is the disease and what is the cure and what is the way for us to be victorious on the face of earth and to have the everlasting happiness on the face of earth and in the hereafter. So we stopped at verse number 249, and then we go to 250 after the test after test after test, and they're going to face the enemies. And what happened then after that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse number 250, وَلَمَّا بَرَزُوا لِجَالُوتَ وَجُنُودِهِ قَالُوا رَبَّنَا أَفْرِغْ عَلَيْنَا صَبْرًا وَثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَنَا وَانصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ. And when they went forth to face Goliath and his soldiers, after the few of the few of the few, right? Very few among the company, those who steadfast with Talut, and they didn't drink from the river, and they said, we have no power whatsoever to face the enemies, and the few among them, they said how many times the less in number would overcome those who are more in numbers by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when they went forth to face, when they had to face the enemies, Goliath and his soldiers, they said, they made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, رَبَّنَا أَفْرِغْ عَلَيْنَا صَبْرًا, which means pour upon us patience. Not just give us patience. أَفْرِغْ, pour on us patience. وَثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَنَا, and plant firmly our feet, and give us victory over the disbelieving people. These people were in such a situation where they are suffering and patiently going to face the enemies to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior. Signs from Allah to teach us that it's not what we think, is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. and they turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with such a humble dua when they are in so much in need. They have no means. There's no physical means whatsoever for them to be victorious. They have nothing but to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by the way, and this is one of the lessons, one of the greatest lessons, that there is no way the victory will come when the hearts are attached to some physical means. And this is the wisdom behind this. They would show in their dua and their actions the true worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they see that there is no victory, there is no help, there is no other means, they took all the means possible, and only turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely. And this is where the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes. And this is something that we will ponder over inshallah ta'ala in more details. So they made this beautiful dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He would pour onto them patience, because it's only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to give them steadfastness, so that they don't flee in front of this mighty enemy. And He would give, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them victory, because it's only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Victory on the disbelievers, those who fight for their materialistic benefits and so on. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَهَزَمُوهُمْ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. So they defeated them by the permission of Allah. فَهَزَمُوهُمْ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَقَتَلَ دَاوُودُ جَالُوتَ وَآتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَهُ مِمَّا يَشَاءُ وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ لَفَسَدَتِ الْأَرْضُ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ ذُو فَضْلٍ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. Which means, so they defeated them by the permission of Allah. And Dawood, killed Goliath, Jalut, and Allah gave him the kingship and prophethood, and taught him from that which He willed. And if it were not for Allah checking some people by means of others, the earth would have been corrupted, but Allah is full of bounty to the worlds. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, stating the fact, who won in this battlefield? The weaker ones physically, but there are the stronger ones because they were the believers. They were steadfast on the truth, and they were steadfast when it comes to these tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested them with. They don't want any materialistic benefit as a result of the fighting for the sake of Allah. They want nothing but to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the victorious. And Dawood, Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, he was a soldier in the army then. He was not the king. The king was, as we heard, Talut. But Dawood, he was a soldier then. It was said that he was very young. And he is the one that killed Jalut, the enemy, the Goliath, the mighty enemy. وَأَتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Dawood, David alayhi salam, al-mulk, kingdom, and al-hikmah, and the wisdom. وَعَلَّمَهُ مِمَّا يَشَاءُ. And He gave him the knowledge from whatever he wills, subhanahu wa ta'ala, all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving the believers the wisdom behind all of this. And why this is how the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ. Daf' literally means pushing. If it's not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pushing the people against one another, checking people with one another, they don't live on the face of earth like that peacefully, everybody away from one another, and people calling for peace and this and that. It doesn't work. This is not the life on the human beings. This is a way to deceive the ignorant. The ignorant masses are being deceived by that. But in reality, is for those who are powerful to overtake the weak, basically. So they would deceive them, and they would say, we want to live in peace. But this is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is always daf'a. This is the sunnah of daf'a. This is the way of people checking, basically, by one another. There is always a struggle between the truth and falsehood. It would never end till the day of judgment. So this is one of the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that people would have this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the wisdom behind it. If it wasn't there, لَفَسَدَتِ الْأَرْضِ. The earth will be corrupted. Why? Because the disbelievers will have the upper hand. And they would defeat the believers, and they would spread corruption. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills for that to happen, so that there was always this fighting for the sake of Allah, and the disbelievers, they're fighting anyway. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an, وَلَا يَزَالُونَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ حَتَّى يَرُدُّوكُمْ عَنْ دِينِكُمْ إِنِ اسْتَطَاعُوا. If you give up on that, they will continue to fight you no matter what you do. Even if you give up to them, and you submit to them, and you surrender to them, and you follow their ways, and you imitate them, and you do whatever they want you to do, They would still fight you till they take you out of your religion and you become disbelievers as them. They would never be satisfied with you. So basically give it up. Be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this is again part of the lessons that inshallah ta'ala we'll talk about it next time if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us life. So this is what's mentioned in the verse. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ ذُو فَضْلٍ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His bounty unto the alameen, the human beings and the jinn and all that exists, He would keep this way of the believers and the disbelievers and the truth and the falsehood having the struggle on the face of earth, so that the truth will be always there, so that the people would be also attracted to the truth and so on. تِلْكَ آيَاتُ اللَّهِ نَتْلُوهَا عَلَيْكَ بِالْحَقِّ. And this is the last verse in the set of verses that talks about the story. تِلْكَ آيَاتُ اللَّهِ نَتْلُوهَا عَلَيْكَ بِالْحَقِّ وَإِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Which means these are verses of Allah which we recite to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in truth. And indeed you are from among the messengers. تِلْكَ آيَاتُ اللَّهِ نَتْلُوهَا عَلَيْكَ بِالْحَقِّ. These are verses of Allah, of what we heard, verses of Allah, signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, miraculous signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained such things to happen. Why? So that people would learn from it and that they would be steadfast. If it was the order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do this and not to do that, this is enough for the believers because this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to see it with a true story, with something that happened in history, something that is repeated all the time, so that they would have an example, so that it make it easy for them to imitate the believers from the nations before, because the outcome is the same if they would imitate and follow the believers from the nations before. It's the same way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is repeated from one generation to the other. That's why it's ayat. It's signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, verses from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. نَتْلُوهَا عَلَيْكَ بِالْحَقِّ. It is recited to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam through Jibreel alayhi salam bil-haqq, by the truth. So this is the truth for people to ponder and to see the truth. وَإِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. And indeed you are among the messengers. So what is the messengers for the people to do with regards to the messengers? Is to listen to them, is to obey them, and not to, for the people, for the ummah, for the companions, for the followers of the companions, for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ to put forward their own opinions and their own ways, and to undermine certain things and to compromise certain things in matters of the religion, seeking the pleasure of the disbelievers. This is what the Qur'an is teaching us? Or the Qur'an is teaching us to be followers of the messengers and to obey the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and know for sure with certainty that victory is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, when you take the means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered you to take. We did nothing but mention the story in the verses of the Qur'an, but inshallah ta'ala, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us life, we need to ponder over the meanings. Pondering over the meanings can take years and years, but we won't do that inshallah ta'ala. We just need to take some of the benefits mentioned in the story of Talut and Jalut, to ponder over it and to make it as a belief in our hearts, so that we would have the proper vision of how things are, and to benefit from it in our personal life, the life of the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to witness the wisdom and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's definitely would increase the iman of the believers. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit from the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to make us among the people of the Qur'an, those who are steadfast on the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.